Ari Yablok is head of brand at Island. It's a Series C startup. He joined Island in the very early days, back when they didn't even have their name out in public. No logo, no story. Their website said coming soon, so quite literally, his job was to build the brand. Selling to CIOs and CISOs of leading global enterprises, they couldn't look like a startup. You rarely get the chance to pitch to a CIO or CISO. They hear every company say the same thing, but we have something new. And so the founders knew they needed to enter the world of the CIO in a way that sent a very clear signal that this is actually a new conversation. How do you send that signal? What kind of message did they use? How do you attract the C level with your product? They are so hard to reach. Why did they need to go against all the playbooks in the industry? And if you've ever wondered, how do you prove the impact of brand on business growth? This is the episode for you. This is Modern Startup Marketing. I am your host, Anna Furmanov, and we are in season 4 where I'm asking a lot of why questions to help bring more clarity to the messy world of early stage startup marketing. If you're at an early stage startup, you're in the right place. Every startup begins bootstrapped, pre-seed, or seed, and that's such an exciting time, but also a really challenging time. 50 to 90% of early stage startups don't make it. We should be able to get our startups over the hump and without guessing or throwing spaghetti. Marketing is an important part of your go-to-market strategy, but you need to understand the why behind the what in order to get clarity, make the right decisions, and get results. Welcome to season 4, where I'll be asking why in order to help bring more clarity to the messy world of early stage startup marketing. Ari Yablok is head of brand at Island. And Ari, you've been there for almost 3 years. So congrats on that.
Thank you.
And I'm really excited to talk to you because Island is Series C funded, $385 million total. But you've been there in the early days. And I just love talking to folks that have been at a startup for a while because things change over time. And I love to kind of take us back to that early time and look back on like all the growth. That's such a cool thing to do. So Island was founded in 2020. Series C has grown so much, which is lucky for you, Ari, or maybe because of you.
Absolutely.
And a quick description, the Island Enterprise browser that has all the core security, IT, and productivity needs of the enterprise built into the browser. So that work is naturally smooth and secure by design. All right, that's a mouthful. Maybe you want to tell me a little bit more, like what ultimately is unique about this idea? And if I'm not mistaken, this is sort of like a new path that you guys have paved, a new category. And I'd also like to understand who's your target buyer.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, thank you for having me. I'm here because I've listened to a lot of your episodes and really get a lot out of this podcast. So I'm happy to contribute what I can here. So the idea was in August 2020, really right in the heart of the pandemic. And it's the result of a couple of veterans of the enterprise security and software space realizing that pretty much all work went online, SaaS, web apps. This is where work is now for the vast majority of enterprises. And the browser is that place that everyone is working on. And yet, because the browser doesn't belong to any company, they download it for free from another company. They have no control over that browser, at least internally. They have no visibility into the browser. And what they are left doing is using all of the traditional tools that have been around for decades already, some of them earlier, but certainly many years old by now in tech years, to try and lock down the browser, get it to stop doing what it was designed to do, which is kind of give you this ultimate flexibility. They didn't want it to give you all that flexibility to download whatever you want and share whatever you want and copy paste whatever you want. And what happened is the end user's experience was frustrating and diminished. The cost of maintaining this huge stack of tools just to get the browser to do what you want it to do or not do was immense and constantly growing. And then you add to that remote work and outsourcing work, and your data is all over the place, and it just became unmanageable. And yet that became the status quo. And there was a simple kind of light bulb moment that happened, which was, what if all of these controls, all of the things the enterprise needs to secure, enable work, make things go the way they want it to go, what if it was built into the browser? And the concept was so simple, and yet it hadn't been done before, that they took the Chromium browser, the open source project that Chrome and Edge and Brave and many other of the most popular browsers are built on, and turned that into an enterprise grade workstation, essentially. And we showed this to CISOs who are struggling to secure this ever growing reality of work now. And they saw the immediate value for them. But then they also said, wait, this is a browser. This isn't a security tool. This is the workspace. We need to get our CIO involved. And they brought it to the CIO. And his team said, wait, HR is going to love this because we could turn this into kind of our hub for work and communicate messages to our organization worldwide. And then the CHRO is involved. So how it spans across the organization has been a really wild journey for us to see, and how it matters to so many different parts of the organization made us kind of like, and this we could get into the marketing and branding of it, have to really think of the widest possible audience to talk to and use cases to talk about in order to really demonstrate the effectiveness of this brand new thing.
Yeah. Love it. Okay, so I actually want to go back to the early days because I know you've got like a bunch of folks that are interested in what you're building now. You mentioned like, well, the CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, and then the CIO, and then HR really was interested. But in the early days, let's talk about that. How big was Island when you first joined, and who was on the team?
So I first encountered Island when I was working for a B2B tech branding agency, and I got a task brought to my desk that my boss told me this is going to be the coolest project you work on. And it was a task to name a company. I was the head of brand messaging. I worked for in the strategy team of the agency called Atreo. And every once in a while, there came a company that wanted a company name, and we would unpack it and I would do it. And that was kind of my job. And the two founders of the company, who were named Mike Fay and Dan Amiga, as well as the chief strategy officer, founding members, Brian Kenyon. And they pitched me the idea of being secure by design, that the place that you work itself would have the security controls built into the workplace so that you wouldn't need to add any other security tool. You wouldn't need to diminish that experience of work for the sake of security, which was commonplace at that time. And it blew my mind. And they wanted a name that kind of captured this idea of being secure, but being free at the same time, free to work the way you want. And I'm not going to lie, one of the first ideas that came to my mind was the name Island. And I did come up with some other names, but ultimately when I pitched it, they're like, that's the one. And we kind of knew very early on that that was going to be it. And I said to myself, this is quite possibly the coolest.
That is so cool. You named the company.
I did, yes. So at the time, there were 10, 11 people in the company. By the time I joined as head of brand, I think I was officially number 24, 25. I need to go check the org chart to make sure.
Okay, I just want to point that out real quick for folks. Like, this is cool because you were hired in with the title head of brand. Not only did you name this company, but then you were hired in as head of brand. You said that there were 10 people at the company and then you were hired in. Is that right?
On paper, when I signed to join, there was in the teens. And by the time I actually started day one, I believe I was number 24, 25, something like that. So it was mainly developers and a small core of, the founding go-to-market team members and me. And shortly after, there was another marketing ops coordinator that we worked side by side, and a chief customer officer and product marketing that kind of came in, and the three of us worked together to build the marketing function of the team while we were still in stealth, which is another interesting part of this, which is from the time I joined.
Oh, you guys were in stealth. That means, were you funded at all or no?
Yeah, we had already received, by the time I joined, right before I joined, we had already received around 70 million in funding. It was a big deal.
Oh, okay. So there was 70 million in funding. Okay.
Yeah,
And what was the round? Sorry for all the questions.
that's fine. We had I believe, a $26 million seed round, and then it got bumped up to 70 by Insight Partners, which I believe was officially Series A, but then our next round of funding was an extension of the Series A, I believe.
Okay. Because there was just so much excitement from investors. I totally get it. Okay.
Yes.
And so you guys had kind of like okay, awesome. Product marketing, marketing ops, head of brand. What did you work on as the head of brand when you joined?
Well, when I joined, we literally didn't even have our name in public yet. We weren't officially Island. We had no logo. We had no story. We had a website that said coming soon. So my job was quite literally build the brand. And this is an important piece here because this solution was going to be the foundation of an enterprise's workspace. This isn't an added tool to the stack. This was going to be what their end users worked on. This was going to be something that everyone touched every day. So we couldn't look like a startup. We needed to buy your trust from the first moment that you encountered us. And we all, and I'm thankful that the founders understood this, which is really why I was brought in that early, again, months before exiting stealth, because when we left stealth and we first said hello to the world, it needed to feel big and established and years already in the making. And that is what I did for those months. I established the brand positioning with the founding leaders. We defined our category as enterprise browser, which was not used by anyone anywhere for many years. There was some other thing years past called an enterprise browser that was a very different thing, and it was already off the market for a long time. We had to develop our narrative, our strategic narrative. We had to develop our messaging map, our personality, our visual identity, and that manifested itself in our initial website and our explainer video and our initial content that we were going to launch with. So all of that was being developed in those months before our initial launch of the company.
That's really cool. So that's everything I help my clients with, believe it or not. Because you're an early stage startup, but you want to build trust and you have to look big. Everybody wants that. And so I'm a fractional head of marketing for early stage startups, typically seed funded. But to hear that there was so much, you guys had some pretty good resources and some pretty good funding too. But it sounds like the founders really understood the importance of the brand and working on all these key pieces, which is I help my clients with too. Your strategic narrative, right? Like, what's your story? Why are you building this? What was the old way? Where are you taking people? Like the category design stuff. I don't work on category design always with my clients, usually not. But if it's needed, you guys realized that you had to define your category because all the old ways to define you didn't work. So you needed something else. You needed some other words, description to define the category. Messaging, personality, visual identity, website, content, all that stuff. Very exciting that you guys. And so you basically left stealth mode and brought on this team, all these people, these resources, right? Brand, product, marketing ops. And I think that's really cool. Like that was early on, and the founders understood that there is power in building in this way.
Yeah, I mean, if I could just elaborate on that a second. If you're talking to a CIO or a CISO, first of all, you rarely get the chance to pitch to them, even though they are being pitched to all day and all night. But they have heard everything. And they have heard the same words recycled over and over again. They have heard every new startup say, oh, yeah, we have something new, but it ends up sounding exactly like the previous pitch that they heard 10 minutes ago. And our founders knew this, and they understood that we needed to enter the world of the CISO and CIO in a way that sent a very clear signal that this is a brand new conversation. We needed that to be extremely clear from the first moment, and brand was going to play a big role in that. We were using terms that weren't used before. Think about it. We were talking to a CISO, and our brand, we deliberately chose, we're not going to use security terms. We're going to throw away the words risk and threat and landscape and attack. All these words are not allowed. We needed you to feel like there was a new pathway here. We weren't going to use hoodies and fingerprints and bugs and locks. Visually, we were going to put you in a very different environment so that you understood this is a new kind of company, a new approach. So these were all signals that brand needed to develop from day one that were strategic not just for our marketing, but for the business, so that they could all reinforce this sense that a new conversation was being had around the way we secure and enable enterprise work.
This is where it's so important to believe in the idea that like marketing rolls up to your business goals. It's not just a side thing that you do, like it's all working as one. And that's where things really accelerate when your business goals are tied to your marketing goals and your brand goals and everyone's kind of marching in on the same path. How big was your sales team? Just curious.
We had a handful of sales execs in the beginning, but they were hiring senior first, which is also not typical of an early stage startup who doesn't necessarily have the budget, or you don't hire someone who just went from managing a whole team to being a sales team of one. But we were doing that, and that was also with the foresight of we needed executive level sales experts to be talking on the level of executives. So when I was on board, we had Bill and Carrie, we had under five,
You're right.
and
That's
then
not
it quickly
typical.
grew. Yeah.
It's very atypical. And so here's a scenario where instead of building out your SDR team and like getting the reps and sets, right? Getting on the phones and doing your cold calls and doing your cold emails, and it's just reps and sets. It's hard, sweaty work. You're hiring the exec level sales experts and you're just hiring like a few.
Yeah.
Are they okay?
No BDRs.
Yeah, no BDRs. Okay. Interesting. Different approach.
Exactly.
How has Island's brand evolved over the years? From what you can remember when you first built for everything from scratch, literally, how has the brand evolved?
So the brand evolved in the sense that in the very beginning, our goal was building category, and you need to kind of be all in on that effort in order for it to work. Because by definition, you are talking about something that no one knows about yet, that even if they see it or hear it once, it needs to be reinforced 10, 20 more times before it sticks, before it becomes, part of the vocabulary, so to speak. So we needed to do a lot of education. We needed to do a lot of kind of having conversations. We were not selling the product. We were simply informing our audience about what it is and what it could do. We spoke a lot in terms of use cases and ways that it could help. We didn't even emphasize action. One of the favorite things I like to point to is at the bottom of our homepage, when most companies are saying, ready to start or it's time, our CTA is when you're ready, let's talk. This needed to be something that you arrive at and then go and do when you're ready to have that conversation. The way it evolved is now we are moving beyond, it's not that we're leaving the education stage, but we're moving beyond the education stage to the trust and impact stage. We are talking about value now. We are talking about customers in the real world that are leading their industry, that are transforming the way they do things because of this new approach. We made a heavy push to get customers of ours on video and tell their stories. in a high quality way, not just, a Zoom call, but really nicely produced story driven content that is meant to say this category isn't just a nice theory, but these are serious global enterprises that are using Island right now and are achieving very serious results. And this is very important reinforcing for our sales teams who need to go and convince executives to ditch the old way and start new. So that is certainly the next phase of Island. And the one after that really is diving into the product. And we have very good reasons for not talking about the product so much, which is again unconventional. Usually people just say, show it to me. We deliberately did not. And if you look at our website, although our website's about to change, you won't see much about the product, but more about the value. And probably as we move forward, we're going to then say, okay, here's a peek behind the curtain of what our product is. And our product really is what drives the brand because the product is work as it should be, this natural place for work to thrive where everything it needs is already inside. And that's the brand. The brand is this natural environment that we're putting you in with natural colors and everything kind of deliberately placed as it should be. So it was meant to reflect that product as well.
See, it's very different. Like just talking to you about it, the words you're using, it doesn't sound like be afraid, we need to secure the workplace, right? It's more like, enjoy it. Enjoy your time here. Spend a little quality time on this browser, right? And so that paints a very different picture. And that's really fun, I think, for Island to have that as part of their brand. I had a client that was in physical security. And so when I worked with them, we were building their website and building their personality and building out the design and everything, the look and feel. And I wanted to go in a different direction, right? To kind of stand out. But we talk about it, right? It's a collaborative effort with the founders. And so they wanted to use images like the locks, the people breaking in, the scare, the alarms, that stuff. And I was like, okay, well, I guess we're going to do it that way. But there's something to it. There's something to looking different, even when you're in the secure, talking to, the CISOs, and there's something interesting and intriguing when you look and feel different. So I like this example, and I'm glad you came on here. You don't always have to look and feel the same as everybody else in your industry. It's actually not a requirement. And I think it's better to stand out in the space.
Yeah, I would even say further when you have motions like marketing and sales and even product development, these are all things where, sure, there are unique challenges that you have to solve on a day to day basis. But the general practice of it is something where you really want to try and find a formula or find the best way to do something and just repeat it and scale it. And that's the best version of it. And brand works completely differently, which is honestly why I think a lot of times, especially in B2B, brand is misunderstood or misinterpreted or placed in the wrong parts of the org or not utilized correctly because the idea of branding is to specifically go against whatever playbook there is in your industry so that people don't group you with competitors when you're supposed to stand out. So people remember you when they walk away from the event that they saw you in or from the ad that you just popped up in so that your story resonates with them in words that only you can say and in a tone that only you can use. All of these things need to be signals that stand alone, which is really different than most of the other motions in the company, even within the marketing team. It's different.
So I want to just go back to when you said your goal has been like more so, and it's changing now, right? But it's been a lot of educating, not selling the product, simply informing the audience, use cases, right? You're not emphasizing action. This actually reminds me of the way that Gong, they also built a category. The companies that build categories seem to go in the same direction. And I had somebody on the show who used to be at Gong. His name is Devin Reed, head of content. We used to be at Gong and now is at Clary. And he told me, and I'll never forget it, they did not talk about the product. They talked about everything except for the product. And so what ended up happening was people wanted to get on the calls because they're putting out such great content. They wanted to get on the sales call, but then they'd get on the call and say, like, I really like you. You're great. I love your content. But what do you do? Right? So not everybody will agree that that's a good thing. But in Gong's case, and I think in your case, it's exactly what you're putting into it is the output you're getting. If you're putting a lot of effort into the education and a lot of effort into, like, let's help them learn and understand, and what are we doing here and where are we taking people from the old way to the new way, and like strategic narrative and all that, then that's what they know because that's what we're spending our time on. And now you're moving beyond education to that trust and impact stage. You're already at Series C. So to me, that's mind boggling because we spend so much time at our early stage startups on kind of everything. Like, we want to create awareness, maybe like the softer stuff, it's not necessarily tied to the product, but other things that the target buyer cares about. And then they're intrigued and they follow you. And then we want to nurture that relationship and we want to build their trust. And we're trying to accomplish a lot, all with one person, all at once, right? But you guys really focused on the education piece and are just now moving beyond education and talking about the value and not even talking about the product so much. So I just find that really fascinating that you're deliberately not talking about the product as much. This doesn't happen a lot in the tech space. And so how were you
There are a
able
couple of
to,
good.
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. There are a couple of good reasons why, and they're, like I said before, they're kind of unique, hard to really replicate or see it happening a lot in the space. Number one, because these conversations are happening at the highest level of the organization. This is not the type of thing where we're trying to spray and pray or kind of scale our sales motion. We're actually trying to be very deliberate over who we talk to, who we spend our time with. These are longer sales cycles because the decision to go with a new browser as well as all of the tools that are inside it is a very big organizational decision. So we knew we needed to make sure to spend the right time with the right people. And marketing, if not done right, if done kind of traditionally, where we just try and get volume, we just go for performance, get as many people to click and as many people to be interested and as many people to call and fill out forms, we would be spending a lot of time looking through names and forms of people we did not want to talk to because they were not going to be able to make a decision this big for their organization. So our goal actually wasn't to bring this high volume of leads to our sales teams. It was to educate that a browser can be an essential part of your security and IT effort so that when you are intrigued enough and you're in pain enough about what you're going through now, you would be willing to explore this as a very serious option. Our executives are on every call. In the beginning of every sales relationship, there's an executive there. That is very uncommon. And it's because, and this is the second point I wanted to make, there's a lot of confusion out there. There are people that think they know what an enterprise browser is because there have been things called secure browsers in the past, which are essentially really bad browsers that just do a lot less because they cut off a lot of the functionality. There are a lot of assumptions and skepticism around the workspace itself being something that can be secure on its own. And we needed to not give you the wrong impression with content that we wouldn't be able to explain and show you ourselves. And that's why we've been holding a lot of the product information close to the chest, because we needed to have that conversation with you and help you understand it better and actually settle some fears and hesitations on the call and not let you draw your own incorrect conclusions from a website or from an article or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense for why you don't reveal as much about the product and really spend the time on the education piece and getting the execs on every call and explaining things because there's a lot of confusion out there. So, who gets on those calls typically? Like, who's your target buyer? And you talked about a few earlier in the conversation. Who do you think about when you think about your target buyer and creating all the brand pieces for them and the content for them?
Who do we think about? Sorry, maybe I didn't understand the question.
Yeah. Who's your target buyer? Like, do you have different, like your homepage? Who's that speaking to?
So the homepage, this is a great question because like I started in the conversation there is the CISO because this delivers a lot of potential value to the security team. There's also the CIO, which is more and more the one kind of understanding the true impact that this can have from a cost effectiveness standpoint, from a productivity standpoint, which is, they own that. And yet you don't typically want to go straight there because it's very expensive to get right to them from a marketing standpoint. The conversations are few and far between. They are not showing up in the typical places that the rest of the enterprise world shows up. What you really want, and we actually heard this from some of our customers who relayed this to us, they said the best way to sell to us is for my team to be struggling with a challenge and to come across you as the best possible solution and to come to us and say, hey, CIO, CISO, we've been struggling with this thing and I think we found the perfect solution. And then they kind of explore this together. And while the CIO is the decision maker, the one that's able to open up the checkbook, he's the one getting that information from their team, he or she from their team, from the -1, -2, -3, the VP, the director level, so that everyone kind of feels they understand why this is the right choice. It's a long way of saying when we go to build out our messaging, and especially on our homepage, we are thinking of the ecosystem around that C-level executive, which essentially breaks down into those at the top with the visionary idea of transforming their company, and those right under them who are dealing with the day to day challenges and want to see how this would impact their life, but aren't necessarily thinking in a visionary way. And that's where we're trying to get both of those messages in.
Was it like that when you just started out building the brand, when the company was much smaller and you got brought in and it was like people in the teens for the team? What were you thinking about in terms of, because this is where things get difficult when you have the person with the wallet, but then you have the people that are going to bring up the struggle and come up with the solution and bring you and say, you know what, I think Island could be really cool. So how do you make sure that the homepage and just keep things straight in your head? I'm curious if you were thinking of the ecosystem when you just came on board.
We were definitely thinking of the ecosystem, but we did not want the wrong person to call. We wanted the C-level exec to be the one that this resonated with. And luckily, the story is understandable. I mean, we are lucky to be selling a highly technical product
Yep.
whose reason for existence is understood by my mother and my wife and my neighbor and anyone I talk to. I could give them the pitch and they're like, oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that means that we kind of felt like as long as we tell the story clearly and in a compelling way, we would not just attract the C-level exec, but their team as well, but ultimately get the call from the C-level.
So I think what I'm hearing is you want to tell the story clearly enough so you can attract the C-level. You're still really focused on the C-level, right? You're not kind of, okay, 30% C-level, 30%, that visionary idea transformation person. You're not splitting up your messaging in that way. You're still trying to clearly attract the C-level person. I just wanted to call that out because I think it's still a point of confusion. We have all these people in the ecosystem, but you do still need to deliver a clear message, especially on the homepage. You can't be talking to like 3 different people. So great. That makes a lot of sense. So I wanted to ask you about how do you prove the impact of brand on business growth? Because as you may or may not know, probably you know, brand kind of gets the stink eye sometimes in the tech startup world. You know what I'm talking about? You're nodding your head, right? Like, brand, that's just a bunch of fluff. No one needs brand. What we need is reps and sets and leads. No. And Island has grown so much since 2020. So I know you guys know what you're doing. I love how the founders made the decision to hire a team of people, not just one, but like a team. And they really believe in marketing and how it impacts business growth. So, how do you prove the impact of brand on business growth?
It is a great question that if you ever find the perfect answer to, I would love for you to call me and let me know and tell everyone's boss. I don't claim to have the perfect answer to that, but I would say that it's less about a number and a target. And again, that's what makes this so challenging when you're in especially early stage. And I'm glad I'm on this podcast talking about this because early stage, especially venture backed, which is most companies these days, most startups, there's so much pressure for every dollar you spend and every person in the team that you are activating and tasking with, that there is some sort of tangible outcome being generated on the other side of that, right? You cannot spend a quarter or 2 quarters, and definitely not more than that, investing time and money into something that you are not going to see the results for by the end of that, right? By the end of that quarter or half. And brand is just not built that way. You do not succeed in branding by starting something in January and getting something in April. You will start seeing signals if you're doing it right. You will start building something, building momentum. You will start gaining traction. These are all parts of the process, but they are not the revenue goals. They are not the metrics that you're going to be able to use to say, look how brand is impacting the business. That's one part of it. It just needs to be something you believe in, and I don't mean to say that there is no tangible value to it, but you need to believe in it in the sense that you don't see the results in any defined moment or metric and in any near term goal in the way that you do with other types of marketing or go to market efforts. And at the same time, you can see very important signals in the market in things like trade shows, field events, where people are coming up and word of mouth saying, I've seen you guys everywhere. I knew when I got here I had to go check you guys out. None of us ever talked to that person. That person's feedback was organic, and they could have decided not to say anything at all, and we could have never known. And yet, that is the sign of a brand at work. And if you're getting that over and over again, if you're getting that at multiple shows, if you're getting way more traffic than the booths around you, then that's a sign that your brand is at work. And when you're doing the branding, whether that's some sort of building a really great content, organic content strategy on social, some great storytelling, right? Things like that, you are not getting the feedback in the moment. You're not getting it necessarily in the comment section. You're not getting it by people who saw or watched your story calling your company, but you're getting it in signals in the weeks and months and sometimes years afterwards with the compound factor. And that's why there needs to be a degree of a longer term investment mindset in brand for it to be effective. And I am blessed to be in a company that understood this early on. And I completely understand companies and founders that have a hard time swallowing that reality and doing it this early on.
There are so many that have a hard time swallowing this reality because of the, I think, information that just filtrates social media, and everybody's looking and everyone's like, well, they were able to grow and they did it that fast, and they generated leads and they built out their sales team, and you don't know what's going on the opposite end, right? There's just very surface level information. And I think you're right. You had mentioned earlier that there's a misunderstanding around brand, and there's more understanding around playbooks and playbooks in the industry and what we've always done. Do it the way we've always done. But I want to question that. I always like to question that. There's a different way, there's a different mindset you can have, and it can actually help you grow so much faster. And it could be part of the value that you see and how you want to grow your business. You could grow it that way. There's so many different ways to grow a company. So that's why I brought you on here, Ari, is to talk about this way to grow. And it's not saying that like all that they did was hire the head of brand. No, but they did hire well-rounded team.
Yeah.
Head of brand, product marketing, marketing operations. And I think that is amazing. One thing that early stage startups, like if you are hiring somebody, sometimes you just don't have the budget, right? Like Island got some really nice, hefty funding. And so they had the budget. But if you're going to find like that one person that you bring on, either full time or fractional, having that person be skilled in a couple of things, for example, product marketing and content, product marketing and growth or demand gen, whatever term you want to use, which kind of is like marketing ops too, right? And then you can get way more done in that way. So this is like a well-rounded team. I love to hear that it happened early stage. All right. So season 4, I focus a lot on the why. Why are we doing things this way? And I think this is perfectly aligned to what we were just talking about. It's not always about the same playbook. Question things, ask why. Why have things been done that way? Why are things misunderstood? What's a better way? I've been working with early stage startups for 4 years now and developed a systematic approach. It's called the MASS method, marketing as a system, rhymes with SaaS. That's why I liked it. And so when I work with my clients, I help them understand the why behind the what of what they're doing so they can make the right decisions and get results. So I wanted to ask you, what marketing big bets are you guys taking in 2024? And I think you started to talk about it more, like the building trust, right? Going away from just the educating piece with the category creation, moving more into like trust building efforts. But what are some big bets that you're taking in 2024 and why those specifically?
So, yeah, I mean, I did talk about kind of the way our brand has evolved and the progression that we see ourselves taking. I do think a lot of our big bets, and this is kind of a zag answer, is what we're not doing. We are betting on not giving into temptation to just explode with every sort of hit every channel, put our name everywhere. That's a big bet because, especially if you get money and you're well funded and your investors are saying, go hit wild numbers, an instinct would be to just spend, 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 right? Just get your name everywhere and get everyone to know you and all of that. And we saw a challenge in doing that the wrong way. And what we needed to continue to do, and we've had lots of meetings about this internally in marketing and just in go to market in general, is understand the types of conversations we want to have and how marketing could help facilitate that while building a healthy level of awareness of not just what we are, but how valuable we can be to an enterprise. And that's our big bet. The 2 levels that we are talking in, which is story driven awareness and high impact on a ground level for a security team or an IT team, and have those 2 play into the team telling their superior, their C level boss, you got to go check into this. And everyone who isn't at that level understanding our story clearly and understanding the value clearly. That's our big bet. And we're going to hold on to that until we feel like we're ready to extend the conversation beyond the C level. I think that's when this type of motion changes. And to answer the question why is we are extremely aware of the right conversation. That's really what it comes down to. And I think again, there are some ways where having a very sales driven company can be hurtful to marketing. And I am very aware of that, that when you don't understand how marketing isn't sales and it needs to operate differently and communicate differently, that can be a challenge. But there's also something really valuable about having sales be a heavy influence on marketing because it focuses marketing on what we need to be doing and what we don't need to be doing, even if that's what everyone else is doing. Here's a good nugget. We spent 2 years not doing any demand gen, not a single campaign, because we knew what that would do is get a lot of the wrong people calling us. So it wasn't worth it to spend the money, even if people didn't click. We didn't want that to distract us from what we were trying to do as a marketing organization. So having this crystal clarity from our executive team, what conversations we wanted to have and how marketing could help that, along with the education layer, that's the bet that we're going to continue to take and hope that we could ride that out until we can no longer hold in the secret and have to just go shout it out to the world.
Is Island a sales-led organization? Is Island a marketing-led organization? What kind of organization is Island?
I don't necessarily think it's a one or the other. I do know that our success is certainly the result of very strong sales leadership. As you heard, our sales team are veterans, are experts. And the only way you could get in the room with C-level executives is if you know how to do that. So our whole model would be broken from the start if we weren't sales led to a certain extent. But that's not to say that it's sales led at the expense of marketing doing its thing. It just means that the nature of our unique challenge as a company requires sales to be hyper focused and marketing to be less conventional as a startup or as an earlier stage company. We are 2 years old in the public eye. It's not too many years to do less conventional things to serve those sales goals. And to a certain extent, I don't think any company should be any different. Marketing should always be aware of what the sales goals are and never be doing marketing for marketing's sake or branding for branding's sake.
And this is coming from a head of brand. So
Yeah.
we're going to listen to you. Everything you say, I'm in agreement. I think the challenge, though, is when marketing is set up to serve the sales team, a lot of times we forget about how it's really to serve the company. And so the sales team will be like, hey, marketing, I need you to make a one-pager. Hey, marketing, I need you to create another landing page, or I need you to print stuff out for that trade show. And so that's like being a servant to sales. And that's different. We're not talking about that. Marketing needs to serve sales goals does not mean marketing needs to serve sales. Okay, we're at the end of our time, but I wanted to ask you, what question do you have for me? I won't be able to answer it now, but what I like to do sometimes is create a bonus episode and answer questions that my guests have for me.
I would say in your work with founders, when you've encountered founders who are not necessarily marketing driven or not appreciative of the role that marketing can have, especially early on in a startup, what are some of the things you do to help them buy in or understand and appreciate its impact on the business?
Wonderful question. And I will have a bonus episode on this because I think it's a really great question. I have a lot to say on it. I think my mindset around this has changed from when I started my business to now. So I will absolutely answer that question in a bonus episode. Until then, Ari, thank you so much for joining me. This was a lot of fun. Folks can find Ari on LinkedIn, Ari Yablok, and you can learn more about Island by going to island.io. And I highly recommend you do because this is a different sort of look and feel website, different sort of video on there with customers talking about how it's just blown them away. And so thank you, Ari, so much.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this weekly episode of Modern Startup Marketing. New episodes are dropping weekly, so make sure you're following wherever you get your podcasts. You can find me on LinkedIn, search for Anna Furmanov, visit my website to learn more about how I help early stage startups, go to furmanovmarketing.com, and don't forget to leave a review if you're loving the show.